Hey there, this is Pete with the Rust content team. So I'm sitting here in Seattle at RustConf 2025. I've got here with me Jack and Niko, and we're taking a chance to sit down today and talk a little bit about the Rust Vision doc and what is the aim, where's it going, these sorts of things. So with that, whoever would like to start, maybe Jack, you want to talk a little bit about the Vision doc?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the vision doc comes down to thinking about not just Rust adoption, but thinking, what do we do to make Rust better for the people that need or want to use it, right? So whether this is because it's just a nice language and people enjoy writing code in it, or because they need the safety, the reliability, the performance that it brings. And in a lot of ways, I think of the vision doc as sort of a framework for, in the future when the project wants to make a decision on whether or not to accept some feature or do some change to the language, like how is that going to affect things, right? Who is it going to enable to do something, and what do we lose by making that decision? And sort of giving this context to the project. And I think this has sort of been absent in a lot of ways, right? We hear feedback from some people, but I think the vision doc is sort of a different way of approaching this. And that's sort of the way I think about the vision doc.
I think I'll add to that. For me, the initial motivations for me was for the vision doc that got me excited was giving an opportunity to have some conversations that I didn't know how we were going to have. And I don't mean one-on-one conversations, although that's part of it, but I mean like project-wide discussions on what are the big trends that are coming? What is happening? Like right now, I think we get very in the minutia a lot of times in our project discussions. Let's look at this feature. What keyword should we use? Should it be a method? These kind of tactical discussions. Whereas then I'll go and I'll be sitting in a meeting in my other hat, right, as a senior principal engineer at Amazon, and I'll hear something like, oh, there's a big trend around supply chain security right now. There's a big push here, and it's what looks like an opportunity for Rust to step in and fill a gap if we can close certain problems, right? Like, well, hey, we have a great memory safety story, but actually to really fill in that supply chain security, we have to shore up the story on Crates.io, or we have to be able to coordinate a CVE in a fashion across the ecosystem. We just don't have that capability. But where are we going to talk about that? Right? Like I can go talk about it on Zulib, but it just doesn't feel like the right venue, and I can go talk about it on internals and also not the right venue. And I can open an RFC, but that's way down the line. So I was hoping to have some place where we could bring in these kind of perspectives. And I think where we've landed is not 100% there yet, but that's okay. I think we're laying the groundwork for that. And we'll have some of that. And I hope that once the vision doc is finished, we'll keep doing things. And I think the Rust content team is a great example, actually, of just opening up these kind of conversations where we're really going out to hear from different stakeholders, both individual developers all the way up to CTOs, on what their perspectives are, and trying to use that to help us guide and take action.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what I'm kind of sensing of the theme here is it's sort of this mechanism whereby conversations can happen, kind of opinions can be gathered, and then some sort of maybe directionality can be obtained. Like, okay, we're hearing this kind of theme come up in this space and over in this space. Okay, this might be something that's coming together.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound too corporate, but some alignment I think would be a good outcome. I don't expect that the whole project's going to settle down in one clear direction. That's not the way open source works, and that's good. But overall, at least a consensus on like, here are some of the major factors, and a shared understanding of the landscape would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this, and I sort of touched on it a little bit, is I don't think you said when we're done with the vision doc, and I think, we have some kind of end goal, which is an RFC, but I think the actual discussions that we're having, right, is more important to continue, right? And think about how to continue having these conversations and hearing from people and figure out the right way to do that. And I think the vision doc is just the start of the work, right?
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, so, certainly we're not gonna be able to talk to everyone. We're not gonna be able to hear from everyone. And, things will change over time anyways, right? And so having some framework, some mechanism to think about how to discuss with people and hear from people in the future, I think is a critical part of the work, right? Not just doing the work we're doing now and coming up with an RFC, but think about how we continue this in the future.
Yeah, I should have said when we're done with this first edition or first draft or something like that, I think to put one more way is like, we're pretty good at tactical. I'd like us to have different mechanisms to lift our eyes up to longer time horizons and actually make decisions on what we're going to prioritize on a longer scale. And that's a hard thing to do in open source. So I don't think we know the right way. I think we have to try a bunch of different attempts before we find something that seems to work.
Do it in a true open source fashion. Like, we may not know the right way, but we're going to do it in the open and try to work with people and figure it out together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the mechanisms that you're making use of, could you maybe speak to how you are gathering some of this input and how you are kind of hearing the voice of both the current users of Rust, but the folks that also, to Jack's point, would like to use Rust or could see the benefits there? Could you speak to some of those mechanisms?
You want to take it or
Yeah,
me?
I'll take it. So really, we have two ways that we're gathering data, right? One, we did a survey, right? This was earlier in the year. We put out the survey where we basically asked three types of questions, right? Basic demographic questions. Where are you? What languages do you use to do your projects? What kind of projects do you work on? How comfortable are you in Rust? We asked some free-form questions, like what do you think Rust is good for? What do you think it's not good for? And then we asked, for contact information, right? Because we want to, if we see something that's interesting, we want to dig into that, be able to ask them. So we did that earlier in March. We got about 5,500 responses, which was a lot more than I expected. Right? I seriously thought going into this we might get a couple hundred, and then they started pouring in, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Good problems to have, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. And we've done some, it's called coding, where we've gone through this and tried to dig in a little bit to the themes that we see in this. But really, since March, we've been doing this other type of gathering data where we interview people. So far, we've done about 65 interviews, most one-on-one, but we've had a couple where we've interviewed a couple people or done like a panel style. But the interviews are typically 45 minutes. Sometimes they go a little bit longer to about an hour. And we try to stay unbiased, right? We try to ask questions without expecting a certain type of response. And we sort of let the interview go where it goes. We ask about experiences, not opinions, right? And ultimately, throughout all of these interviews, we try to find the common themes across them. What do people have in common? And often, like sometimes, it's the case that an interviewer or person being interviewed says something that actually nobody else says, and that's also an important point, right? It's not always the thing that is in common, but actually going into the interviews, you can hear specific things, right? And this is sort of a more interactive way of getting information in the survey, because you can really dig in when you hear something that's maybe a little unexpected.
I think that's sort of the end goal, right? I feel like once you reach the point where you're hearing the same things over and over, that's kind of when you know you're done. So you're looking and hoping you'll hear something new and fresh,
right,
you hadn't heard before.
Finding some signal, right? Like, and that signal might show up, as you said, like across a broad swath, or it might be someone that's in some unique niche or industry, right? That would really like to use Rust, but may be prevented from one reason or the other, or may feel they're prevented from one reason or the other, and may not be aware of some resource that's actually out there.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say is we took contact info in the survey, and we have talked to a number of those people. we've also made an effort to reach out through other channels, and there's good reasons for that, which is partly kind of what you were just hinting at, that like our existing channels for speaking to people are really good at reaching certain groups, right? Like who reads the Rust blog, who's on the Reddit, who's likely to respond is not necessarily representative of the whole Rust universe, especially people who don't know that, who have problems that Rust or some extension of Rust could solve for them, but don't know it yet, right? And those are the people that probably have, I would most like to talk to, but they're the hardest to reach through our traditional channels, so we have to sort of actively seek them out.
And I think also an important part of this is actually people that don't want to use Rust for some reason, right? And maybe this helps us to figure out where Rust isn't good and sort of what we shouldn't focus on, right? And I think that's
That's a hard one.
it's a really hard set of people to reach, because it's even harder than the people that have heard of Rust or like may use Rust but just haven't thought about it. It's the people that are like actively not considering Rust, and that's like I said, it's a good negative space to think about how to reach, right, and figure out where our limits are.
I'm super curious. How do you find these people? Like, how do you find someone that sort of is making it their business to stay actively away from Rust? How do you find them and solicit them and try to bring them in? There may not be a perfect way of doing this, and there may have been. We tried X, Y, and Z, and it kind of worked. But I'm curious how you find those folks.
I mean, well, I'll tell you what I've tried, which is I've gone on, I know some people, I reach out to them. I've also gone on internal channels within Amazon and poked around and said like, hey, Rust, calling all Rust skeptics, like, I know you're out there, I need your help. I would say we haven't yet, actually still on my to-do list is to follow up with everybody. I didn't get a ton of responses to those kind of questions, but I did get some, right? And I think at the end of the day, you just do the best you can. Jack and I went to a Python meetup.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
That was fun. It was.
I wouldn't say we found Rust skeptics there, more like
No, we
Rust
didn't find
agnostics.
skeptics.
or
I mean, we
something.
found a couple people that really weren't interested in Rust, right? Mostly because they were doing Python as a hobby, and
Yeah. Okay.
it's not like they were trying to solve some problem, right? And Rust would help them. But we did actually find a couple people that were sort of tangentially related, and I think we had planned to go to some other meetups, and they kind of fell through. But that's still on the list, right? Is to sort of go to where people are, right? I mean, it certainly helps if you have an internal channel where you can say, hey,
Calling out all skeptics. So.
yeah. I thought about like going to like the Golang subreddit and saying, hey, but I feel like the moderator would be like, this isn't Go, right?
Go away. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I was going to say Go. I still feel like Go is the dark zone because we didn't get a lot of survey responses. We've got lots from people who use every language except for Go, where we had
really?
relatively few,
Okay.
or every major language. And I don't know quite why that is. I mean, I could hypothesize, but I don't really know. But it seems like it does hint a tantalizing suggestion that might be a community where we could seek out either people who are Rust skeptics or just are having. I'm kind of interested in this take of what is Rust's mission now? What are we here for? We're not here just to get everyone in the world to use Go, to use Rust.
Reverse that.
Right. Well, either way, right? But like I want there to be more flowers and all that, and
Yep.
blooming and everything.
Yep.
So what are we here for? And it seems like I'm kind of interested in this sweet spot of people who have tools but aren't satisfied with them for reasons that Rust can help, right? Which is a hard one. It comes back to what Jack said about when should you not use Rust, right? I think I have places where I don't use Rust, but it's actually it's almost the wrong question in my mind. It's more like, when would I rather use a different tool? It's not that I wouldn't want to use Rust for that. It's like, I would pick a different tool because it would be a better fit, then maybe that's not an area that, of course I would like to make Rust better for that area, but I don't necessarily want to put all our energy into it, and certainly not at the expense of an area where Rust is the only tool that's available. Right?
I think that's actually a really interesting point too, right? Is the goal of all this work is not to make Rust into a language that's different, right? It's to take the values that we see in Rust and we want Rust to be and expand it, right? Make it easier for people to buy into this. So, no, we're not going to add a GC because we can get 10x the developers, right? We want to keep Rust to be the language that people rely on it to be, and make it more applicable to more domains or to more people, while maintaining that sort of core values.
But to do that, we have to have a crisp description of what it is that people are that we want to treasure exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this paradigm of maybe like what are the core strengths or the core values that Rust already has versus maybe some kind of like growth opportunities, some spaces where you could bring some of those core strengths just to different domains or to different places that folks just may not be aware of the ability to use Rust in them, or may not be enabled at the moment. Is this characterization along the lines of maybe what you're thinking? Is these core strengths and kind of growth?
I think that's right. And one thing I've noticed, having been hacking on Rust a long time, is I think it definitely happens sometimes that people come along and quote some maxim of Rust design, and it's like, but it's always been this way. And I'm like, well, but I never agreed with that. Like, it's like we did it that way because it was expedient. I'm not convinced that was a deep principle that we meant to enshrine for all time. And other times it is. It's like, or it was a principle we meant to enshrine, and I think we should change it. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think we have, we each of us have some notion of what those values are, but they're different per individuals, and it's helpful to tease out which ones are the most widely shared and which ones are like applicable to some sub-communities or something like that.
Kind of like Rust's values in like the eye of the beholder a little bit. There's sort of every individual maybe has their own perspective on this, and it's finding maybe what you had said before about having a crisp description of can we rally around these are the set of things that Rust users and potential Rust users could really find valuable. And then here's also these things that we can do to really grow it out and allow others to use this in domains and in spaces that they hadn't in the past. So yeah, I really like that description of saying it should be crisp. We should have something written down this way.
Yeah. And this is actually, the least surprising thing that's come from the interviews and the surveys is like the things that we think Rust is good at, everyone tends to agree, right? Reliability, performance, things like tooling and how good the tooling is. These are, by and large, the most consistent across interviews and surveys, and also the things that we kind of already knew, right? It's sort of the opposite, right? The things that are not good, these are a little bit more varied. We have some idea, and it's not like we are completely, guessing before, but at the same time, it's a little bit more varied. Whereas, like, the things that Rust is good at are on the dot, exactly what we could have said going in.
Yeah, it's true. But the thing I'm happiest about of all those things that we already knew, but the thing that I think is the coolest aspect of Rust is has to do with the tooling, and specifically the theme that I've heard from a few people, where they bring up tools that in my mind aren't part of the Rust project. There are things that are maintained in the Crates.io ecosystem, but that have just sort of that emulate the same level of polish as the Rust compiler, right? So they'll use the Rust style error messages with the underlines and the squiggles, and they'll use claps so they get nice, consistent command line handling and whatever else. And so it's like we set a standard that everyone else has either lived up to or in many cases excelled, right? A lot of times it's like, oh dang, those error messages look nice outside. Like we should bring that code into the compiler. But I think that's super cool. And to me, that's the kind of one of the core values that I most love about Rust, and which is the extensibility, the library-oriented nature. And it is definitely a theme that I hear both in some of the interviews we've done and just from random discussion that, that brings challenges. Like people don't necessarily, if you know what crates to use, sure, Rust is awesome. But finding out what crates to use is not always easy. And people have been saying that for years, and we haven't really figured out how we're going to crack it. But it's one of those things where I hope that getting more eyes on the problem, being able to talk about here are the concrete ways that people told us it impacts them, might help us unblock some either new ideas or just new consensus that we should do something.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me in our conversation so far is I think you mentioned experiences over opinions, and that it tended to be that people's experiences on the good were generally kind of pointed in the same direction towards a similar set of ideals. I'm curious how you go about eliciting what don't you like, or what are the gaps? Are there things that you have found maybe effective when you're talking with folks, how to go about finding those things that are challenges that they face?
So we'd like to ask questions like, the last time you used Rust, what did you find difficult, right? So, thinking less about like, what do you think is hard in Rust, but more about like, what concrete problem did they encounter? And then you can dig in a little bit. One question that I ask sometimes, which is a little varied, right? It's a little bit of a bias introduced, is like, if you were to write a program not using Rust, what would it be, right? Which kind of gives a similar vibe, but is a little bit also more opinionated. But the idea is to sort of gauge sort of what are their difficulties, and then to try to dig into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder, I feel like this is a skill I've been developing. Like I go back and read my early interview transcripts and I'm like, dang it, I was leading the witness all over the place. Yeah, but I'm getting better at it. Yeah. What I noticed is for the negative stuff, especially, I think people often say, oh, there's nothing wrong, it's fine. And then you start digging a little bit, and either because sometimes it's helpful to have two people. We've had a few interviews where like one person is saying, no, it's fine, and the other one's like, really? Don't you remember that thing you said last week? And then they're like, oh yeah, that's true. But a lot of times, even just with one, just getting them to, once they start remembering the problems, the problems start coming. But at that first one is hard.
Yeah, I've had this, several times where, I ask, last time you used Rust, what was difficult? And they say something, right? And then, like later on in the interview, they actually bring up something completely different. And it's like, okay, good. And this is kind of the nice thing about the interview format, right? Is it lets them sort of go where they think the interview should go, with a little bit of sort of direction. But you more often than not uncover these things. You just kind of got to probe it a little bit.
Kind of putting up some signposts, but ultimately letting them be in the driver's seat and kind of take the conversation where kind of naturally would go. Okay.
Yeah, and look for words that stand out to you. I think sometimes people will drop in a word that has like a surprising emotional charge. They won't say much, but they'll say like, they'll just have picked a particular word that's a little stronger than you might have thought. And that might be a time to pick up and say, I noticed you said, like, the power tracker tortured me. Like, why would you say tortured?
Did it have the Iron Maiden out and everything, right? Yeah, so it sounds like it's, maybe to highlight what you both seem to be going for or saying here is emotion. A lot of this may be rooted in emotion, and if you can maybe help the interviewee tap into maybe that emotional state they were in when, oh, this thing is just not working, then suddenly they'll be maybe thinking along that direction and thinking about, oh yeah, and this didn't work, and that didn't work, and this didn't work, once you've sort of maybe tuned them into that feeling a little bit.
Yeah. It's very different, but I've noticed for me, like at some point during the Rust development spiral, of the years, I became more attuned to, can I say, early on it was like I would learn how to fix a problem in Rust and then I would just fix it when I encountered it and I wouldn't think more about it. Meaning like a workaround or just like the old borrow checker, you know, put some extra braces in or the things you had to do in the olden days. And I've become attuned now, I think, to noticing these small hiccups as they happen and writing them in the back of my mind of like, no, that was friction. Like, yes, you solved it, but it was friction. And usually that's a good signpost of if I'm encountering it at 1%, then someone else is at 100. And I think that's super useful and probably actually the most useful tool. But what I am really intrigued with in these interviews is a chance to step outside of the friction that I personally encounter and hear somebody else's and really give it credence. Because the other thing I've noticed is people will come and say, this is hard, and I'm like, it's fine. They're exaggerating. And then I try to write that code and I'm like, oh my God, we have to fix this.
Yeah.
This is so irritating.
I mean, this is something that I've realized Niko does a lot is he kind of underestimates the ordinary Rust programmer. I mean, for good and bad, right? I mean, but you know, it's enlightening in a lot.
Underestimate or overestimate?
I don't know.
I think I do both.
But to your point, like sometimes having a chance to walk maybe not 1,000 miles, but maybe 100 miles in somebody's shoes can help you get an appreciation for the challenges that they're facing.
And yeah, I feel like that's really useful. I also think we have to find ways to not lean on that because you can't literally experience everybody's discomfort. Like sometimes you literally can't because it's not available to you because it's some privilege or other reason. And other times you just don't have time to go stub your toe in all the ways that it can be stubbed.
There's only so many toes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
And it's also interesting, right? Because for these things that are easy for Niko to solve, they're probably a lot harder for other people to solve. And this is one thing that comes up a lot in interviews where, in the survey data, where people say, I tried Rust and I failed. And they come back and say, I finally got it. And some of this is probably this, where there's maybe some roadblock that they just couldn't get over, and they maybe come back with a fresh perspective. But, it sort of is death by 1,000 paper cuts in a lot of ways. And it's not always the big things. It's sometimes the small things like this. And so...
In fact, I would say it's often the small things.
Yeah.
Or it's like the small things make the big things insurmountable.
Yeah.
Because it's like those little frictions just prevent you from attacking the real problem. Yeah. I think one useful way to get an instinct for that actually is to go throw yourself into something new. Like surmounting Rust obstacles is not too exciting for me, but going and trying to learn
macros.
I was going to say like Swift, but trying to learn just something new. To heck with it. Amazon's internal developer tools, let me tell you, oh boy. Like learning one of these complex systems that has a lot of moving parts and hey, actually there's not a lot of great, you remember again what it feels like to read a paragraph and be like, I only understand 1 out of 5 words in here and what are all these random nouns and that I think that feeling, even though the details are different, it's good to have empathy for it.
Recapturing that feeling as someone new, someone starting out, and putting yourself in intentionally uncomfortable positions like that, where it's, oh no, I really do need to try to do something. Okay, let me try to pick this technology or this tool to do it, to put myself in that role again.
I think the counter is also good too, right? If you hear about a language that a lot of people like and you go and test it out, maybe you find those things that are fun or things that are, oh, this is actually cool, right? Like, and you think about how this could apply to Rust in some way.
I'll give you an interesting example of this. I don't know if this is a good move or not, but some time back I did try Swift, and I actually had a great experience overall. But I experienced 2 things. This was around 28. Well, I want to say around 2018, but maybe not. Two things I noticed. One was there are no import statements. things just work. It was like I just type the name of a class from another file that's in the same Xcode project, and voila. I don't know how that works, but it does. I mean, I can imagine. And then the other thing was that I typed a recursive enum, and Xcode was like, would you like to tag this as indirect? And then I said yes, and then it put the keyword there. And this was before Rust Analyzer was quite as nice to use, so it all seemed very, very shiny to me. But I feel like we were also in the midst of overhauling Rust's module system at the time, and so the idea of like, oh, we could just not have import statements at all is definitely optimizing heavy for like zero friction on the common case, right? At some cost. And then the other one of, actually, I think I never in a million years would have thought to write indirect in front of this enum unless I went and read the docs. But it didn't really slow me down because the tool just solved it for me. Right? So a lot of times, that's a trade-off I've come to respect more, that the tools can really change the calculus a lot.
I think this is also true of like Rust's error messages too.
Yeah, I think so.
Right?
We hear that a lot in the interviews. I mean,
Where, they may not know what's going on, but the compiler will just tell you, change this, and it works. And
as long as it's reliable.
which I think it generally is, right? I mean, sometimes, don't get me started, sometimes it fails utterly, but oftentimes it works pretty well, right? The compiler will tell you, try this, and you try it, and it just works. And even sometimes you can have the compiler fix it for you, right? Run cargo fix, and it works, right? And
P.S. Oh, never mind. I thought of the perfect example of if you want to experience what it's like to dive into Rust and not know anything, is go try to set up a JavaScript package that builds a package to be distributed to the web. There's like 14 choices. Yes, build versus this other thing. I don't even remember all the names.
Okay.
And everybody's website is like a little bit out of date about which is the cool one that you should be using now. And I don't know. To me, it's just like that's hell right there. Once you get it set up, it's good.
Once you've made the choice.
Yeah. Once you're committed and you've gotten it working and decided which module system you're going to use.
yeah, good thing Rust doesn't give you a lot of choices, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there are opinionated things in Rust, which I think are appreciated at times by folks that are maybe coming from different backgrounds, like maybe that background, or maybe like the background of, say, C++ or C, where there are many options. But on the other hand, there, I think, have been over the years hooks and extension points made in Rust tooling, right, to allow for other choices to be made and other things to be hooked in. So. I think earlier were you going to continue that point that you had a little bit earlier before Niko jumped in with the PS?
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay, then,
It had just been bugging me that whole time. I was like, I didn't have the right example.
Needed to jump out, so yeah, all good.
That's okay. Yeah, it wasn't that big.
Okay, all good then. And so, yeah, I think we're nearing the point where we can start to wind down, but I wanted to make sure that I leave some time here that if there are things that maybe we didn't touch on, some fun anecdote, I don't know, anything that you all had that you wanted to share before we closed out, now's a great time.
I think I'll share one quote, right, from an interview. We're going to present it at the end of the presentation tomorrow, but somebody told me, near the end of the interview, I asked them, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we close out? And he said something to the effect of, he had, told me a couple things of what he thought of, but, he was like, if all of these things were done, I'd be a happy Rust programmer. If not, I'd still be a Rust programmer. and this sort of, to me, highlights that, Rust solves a lot of things for a lot of people. And I think the goal is to make it so that even if it solves it, we make it a good experience for them, right? We make it where they're not stumbling every step of the way to get to something that works for them, but rather it's a better experience. And I really like that quote. It really kind of sticks out to me because it happens a lot, right? That people say, Rust is great, but I really struggled, right, to learn it. And I think, people engage in that struggle because it offers so much to them. And I also think that for the people who maybe think that it doesn't offer as much, those struggles really turn people away. And I want to make that experience better.
Man, you didn't warn me I was going to have to pick like the one emblematic ending quote, but I'll tell you my favorite quote. It's not inspirational like Jack's. My favorite one of all of them has been a quote from the survey, not an interview, but just a short survey free text that said, paraphrased, "I tried to use Rust and it was hard. I went away. I came back and it's still hard." And it has remained hard.
This is the duality of quotes. So.
There's a lot of quotes that say, "I went away, I came back, and it was better." And this one is just like, you know what? I just don't get it. And I really feel for that person. I'm so glad they came, and nonetheless they filled out our survey.
Nice that they checked back in, right?
I should go check. They probably do use Rust. Who knows? But anyway, I really want to make that better. But that's my favorite quote, but only because I have like a dark sense of humor or something. I think Jack nailed it. We want to make it really nice. I think that I think what I've taken away from a lot of these conversations, and that I have to keep circling back to sometimes in my head, is how important reliability is. Like it is I'm going to misuse Latin, sine qua non or something, I don't know, it is the guiding light of the Rust experience that everybody talks about. And I think, I say that because I think I'm often actually a little bit on the other side in a lot of debates with people sometimes for a while, where I'm pushing for I think we can make this nice, and okay, there's an edge case here, but is that really going to come up? And a lot of times I end up getting convinced, and we find some midway ground that's good. And I think that struggle is worthwhile. I guess it's a real tension that is a hard one, where reliability usually means friction in some sense, making sure you know what you're doing. And so how to resolve that with giving you enough room to make incremental progress that you don't get frustrated and you don't give up, and that you actually make it to the finish line, I think is really hard. And I think we've done a pretty good job. I think we've found a lot of times that unorthodox tools like compiler error messages and so on can really change the trade-off, and I think we have to keep exploring that, looking for opportunities that are outside the space of what's being discussed, and not just the language design, but the whole experience. So I would encourage us to keep doing that. I think it's going to be great if we can.
Yeah, and I'm curious, are there sort of next steps, anything that folks could do to help contribute to the Vision Doc and helping to make it really helpful for project teams and really the Rust community to continue to move forward? Are there, the corny thing, call to action, that...
So I think, we're sort of trying to wrap up with the interviews at this point. I mean, there are some known gaps that we have. So we talked about it a little bit earlier, right? We haven't talked to a lot of Go people, right? So if you're a Go person and don't ever consider using Rust, maybe come talk to us and tell us why. If you're a beginner or somebody who hates Rust for some reason, also good to talk to. Other than that, again, I don't think we're ever going to get every domain ever, but I don't know.
It's a process, right?
Say what?
It's a process.
Yeah.
I think I have one. I have something. Not to interrupt you. Sounded like you were wrapping up.
Yeah.
I have one, which is read the damn thing we write. I have this feeling that, the nightmare I have for this effort is not that we fail to produce something useful or whatever. It's that we write it and sort of it's like, okay, that's nice, but I'm still hacking on Rust and I don't have time to read that, RFC or something. So engaging with it, and even if the feedback is that's not representative of my experience, or in fact, especially if that's the feedback I think is the thing I really want the most. That said, we do still have interviews to do. We do still have work to do. If folks are keen to participate from that side, there's room for that.
Having a dialogue maybe with what is produced, you know.
Yeah, I think
what is produced may not be representative of everyone and probably will not be representative of everyone. And if you have other thoughts,
right.
Perfect.
It's like draft the first page or the blank page syndrome or whatever, right? Like part of the value is having something that everyone can say that's not right. And to that end, like maybe thinking about what the successors look like. I want us to have, we have the project goals that are on the 6-month horizon. We have the RFCs, which are like the design of a thing. We're still tinkering with what flagship goals kind of look like, but I think they're sort of, nonetheless, they may be longer than 6 months, but they're more like broad themes of work. I think we need something in between the vision doc and the project goals that are like North Stars, where we say, you know, over a 3 to 5 year plan, we're gonna, or time horizon, we're gonna move the needle on async Rust in these specific ways. And we know it's gonna take a while. And I hope that it would be informed by the vision doc. So it sort of sits in between. So I don't know. I'm excited to see Rust mature and get past its, or grow into the, get past is the wrong term. I think Rust has gone through a lot of growth lately. A lot of our processes aren't scaling as well as they used to, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that we didn't waste too much time building up like North Stars and all that stuff when it was fairly clear what the next steps were. Now that it's getting harder, I hope people engage with this planning and try to find ways to make it that it's helpful to them while not being too intrusive. Yeah.
And this is not just users, but also within the project itself, right? Figuring out.
Yeah. I'm actually speaking to maintainers, not users, in case that wasn't clear.
It's both.
It's both. There's not always a sharp line also, but.
Right.
Yeah, ensuring that, I guess folks in the broader Rust community know that their voices are being heard, right? And these things are being brought up and written down. But to both of your points that, hey, maintainers, hey, folks in the Rust project, here's something that's written. Let's have a dialogue about it. Let's see if there's enough texture there for engaging with it. So that really sounds like I'm excited to see what the next steps are with this and what comes out and take a read through myself. So with that, I'd really like to thank you both for taking the time during busy RustConf schedule to sit down and have a little chat. So again, this is Pete with the Rust content team signing off with Jack and with Niko here. So thanks. Take care.